continue on with the. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about kind of like kind of like a lot of kind of major concepts, kind of like thinking that goes into um, to balancing a PVE game. And I'll admit, like a lot of my experiences has been with Meridian 59, which I said before, kind of became a very PvP focused game. But like I play a lot of PVE games, so I can kind of turn my design mind here, but I'm not gonna say that that I know the best of anybody out there. Like there's obviously other more experienced designers than I am, but kind of one of the big concerns you kind of have to look out for is maximizing interest. Kind of going back to kind of talking about business models, we talked about business models before. The design always supports the business model, whether no matter no matter if it's free to play, buy to play, or subscription. And so for a lot of subscription based MMOs, they're looking at they look at how to keep people interested. And just in general, you kind of want people to play your game longer. Until of course you get you create the sequel to the game, and then you want people to stop playing the stupid old game and start playing the cool new game. So one of the problems you run into is like how fast is fast enough to keep people interested, because if the progress is too slow, people will get bored and leave. If the progress is too fast, then they'll cap out and leave. Looking at Warframe as an example here. Warframe basically has it so that you always have something to do. You can always master a new weapon. You can always do. You can always basically get a new frame to form up to master that.
There's always something to farm.
Right. I think that that's kind of an important thing. But you look at if you look at kind of more traditional MMOs, sometimes you don't have that. Like sometimes there's a very simple path forward. In World of Warcraft, originally people kind of really focused on getting character up to max level, and especially for people who didn't want to raid, the idea is they'd get up to max level. And then they would basically stop playing.
Right.
Because they had maxed out, or they'd basically kind of play alts or whatnot. And so there's
focusing on crafting or.
Right. And so but I knew several people where their whole shtick was basically getting to max level, and then they were done. They had one character, they got to max level, they played through the story essentially, they played through the zones, they had no interest in raiding. So that was the end of their interest in the game after that. And so for people like that, how fast do you let them advance? And this is what makes kind of a lot of the design issues tricky, is that there's kind of no one right answer. For the people who play very casually and will master one class and then unsubscribe, well, you want them to kind of take as long as possible to get to the stopping point essentially. For the people who want to who do alts, you can let them advance faster because hey, a lot of classes, you have a lot of alts they're going to play. And then for people who want to just get up to max level as fast as possible in order to raid, well, you want them to advance super quick so they can get to what they consider the fun, not the grinding through all the zones and whatnot.
Right, but then that's difficult because they're all going through the same content.
Right. Exactly. And so you might feel like, oh, things are too slow or too fast, but you kind of keep in mind that they're MMOs kind of attract a large group of people. I think another kind of major design consideration has been basically different content for different skill levels, finding something that a lot of people kind of pick their challenge. Again, I talked about before about the different levels of dungeons, the heroics and mythics and extremes and hard modes and whatnot. Kind of the idea of letting people kind of figure out what they find fun, find that, and focus on that. For me in Final Fantasy XIV, I find it fun to maximize all my classes. and trying to kind of figure out ways to do that, especially like crafting and whatnot, without it feeling super tedious.
There's a secret I need to tell you.
Uh-oh.
Crafting in 14 is super tedious.
Well, I mean, not really. For me personally, like the secrets are basically, you just kind of do things on a daily basis, and if you do like a little bit on a daily basis, like I've never used leaves to grind crafting. The only times I've used leaves for that is for something related to that has been with gathering. Like if I get like several levels ahead of mining or botany,
right?
I'll use leaves to kind of equal them out, so I can basically share equipment again. But by and large, like I will do grind company turn-ins, I will do East Tribe class, which is these are all things that you can do essentially once or a few times per day, and you just keep at it. And like, like I'm taking a couple months, whereas somebody else can basically get it done in a week. But you know what? I don't hate myself as much after.
Yeah, I guess that's my issue. I just hate myself.
Well, I mean, some people are looking for that excuse to hate themselves more.
Like even without doing that stuff, I just hate myself.
and so like for me, like that's what a lot of my fun is in PVE, is trying to figure out like what makes the game, what makes it fun for me that I can tolerate it. And like for me, the two things are like like grinding a little bit every day as opposed to like a whole lot in one session. The thing that kind of like I look at is playing with friends, like like we're sitting here basically grinding through relics. Like this is not something I'd be like super enthusiastic about doing solo.
This is my bread and butter for this game.
Yeah.
But so one of the things I've thought about lately is because I just ask myself these questions when I'm doing this stuff, and like, are we to a point where the whole leveling process of in games in general is like, has that lost its novelty? And like, are games trying to like figure out like different ways of handling like levels and experience?
I think like I think a lot of like what we could do. I mean, so like again, like the major focus you're looking at for PVE stuff is like allowing people to kind of like express mastery over the game.
Mm-hmm.
And like like a lot of that used to be over levels, and like in the first text mod, which was which blended PVE and PvP together, you had permadeath. And so
right.
In the original text mod, like dying sucked, because you would even running away from a fight would basically like cause you to lose experience.
Right.
And dying basically caused you to lose the whole character. And so like in that type of situation, like the level, your level meaningful. If you saw a high level character, here was someone that basically either was like like knew how to manage the game so that they could basically not get into dangerous situations, or who was basically like very clever, very capable, very clever at not getting in over their head. And so and we've lost a little bit of that, because now like most games, essentially you're just like a level is basically just like a question of how much time you put into the game.
Right, it's trivial at this point in most games.
I wouldn't say trivial, but like the process is trivial, but not necessarily the effort to put it into it, because you still have to put in a lot of time. Like so like my thing is like my main character is a basically has all max level and everything, gathering, crafting, gathering, crafting, and combat classes. And so like like for me, kind of part of the fun is trying to figure out how to do these things in a way that that doesn't destroy my soul. And so I think that so I think there's a little bit of like we're kind of holding on to the vestiges of an old system.
Mm-hmm.
where we've changed things, so that like we've changed things so that like the level is not quite so meaningful to us anymore.
Right.
Because people don't lose experience, and so I think we're like looking for alternative ways of letting people kind of like express mastery is would be something that's important, I think, for new MMOs as they move forward.
Right, because I'm just thinking like in 14, you see someone with a level 70 character, it's not that impressive. It's like the expected standard now for someone to be level 70. It's not like, oh my god, they're level 70. They're so good at the game.
They're such a badass. Yeah.
Like playing 11, you see someone that's level 75, you have to acknowledge that they've accomplished something, even if they only have 175, because in 11, once you hit level 50, you have to do an unlock quest every 5 levels after that.
Right.
And those quests are extremely difficult.
Right.
So, but they're a one-time thing, thankfully enough. So once you get your first 75, it's clear sailing from that point.
Right.
But so like if you're playing like say the private server that I play on for 11, and you see someone who has every class that's available on that server at 75, you go, oh shit.
Right. That's something to kind of again, like this is kind of the and so like you kind of have this balance between like in a lot of older games, like had the idea of displaying the mastery through, purely through level. Now we kind of have people display mastery more through like a rating, like gear almost, appearance a lot of times too.
Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing I was going to say with 11 in particular is if someone has all those classes to 75, that means they have a lot of money in the game.
Right.
Because it's so player economy based that you can't just get the level 75 gear by rating or whatever. You have to buy it.
Right.
That means they figured out how to make money on the server too, which then that's some prestige to have as well, because they have full mastery of the game, gil, money, experience, spells, everything.
Right.
So that's there's respect there.
Right.
But someone like that in 14 is just kind of like, man, well, you just you
put in the time.
You do your daily roulettes. Good for you.
Right.
So yeah, I mean using those two, that's a good.
Yeah. Well, and like I mean, for me personally, I don't have a very high achiever, motivation. Like I'm proud of like getting all 70s because like like I said, there's the added dimension for me of like not boring myself to death.
Right.
And so like doing that and figuring out how to do that and figuring out how to maximize things, that's fun for me. But I don't have the achiever desire of like somebody saying, oh my god, you have all 70s, you're amazing.
Right.
I mean, I like to hear that, but like that's not my main. That's not why I got all 70s. I got all 70s because I want to explore a lot of the game mechanics. I want to kind of do a lot of things. And so like this is kind of the tricky part too. Is like if you don't just focus on achievers, like how do you get it? How do you allow other kind of player types to kind of like understand and find their fun?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get explorers involved? How do you get the socializers involved? And how, killers are still going to be part of a game. They're going to be very unfulfilled, but they're still going to be a part of the game. So how do you kind of either deal with or cater them, or do whatever you need to in order to kind of manage your game. One other really interesting thing, like for PVE though, and I don't think like a whole lot of people kind of like really, spend a whole lot of time thinking about this, understanding it, but like you have the obsolescence of content.
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy 14 has this really interesting system. Like you mentioned the roulettes.
Right.
And what the roulettes do, like for leveling a roulette, when you do a leveling roulette, it assigns you into a random dungeon that's part of the main story quest, or it's one of the side quests. But what the roulette does is it'll give you a boost of experience, so that say you're level 40 and you run a level 20 dungeon, you're going to get experience awarded out of that as if roughly you had run a level 40 dungeon.
Right.
And a little bit extra on top of that, I think, but basically the reward, But what this does, so the interesting is what this does is like, if you're put in that level 20 dungeon, well, there might be somebody that needs to run that level 20 dungeon. If they didn't have roulette, well, then you'd have to find someone who's going, who'd be willing to run the level 20 dungeon at level 20. If you're coming to a game late, that you might have a real hard time finding someone to do that.
Yeah.
And so,
14 is really good about making sure there's people available.
Right.
To do things.
Right. And so, so exactly. And so so you have kind of this the roulette system that allows you to kind of like That's
which
unrefined relic.
Which
somebody's taking the formats of the Zephyr. Okay.
Which going back to WoW, it was impossible for me to get into a dungeon that was let's say Legion, pre-Legion expansion pack, because nobody was leveling characters at that time, because everyone was focused on the new expansion pack. So like I'd queue into the dungeon finder, and there'd be nobody there. Like the queue times would be like no one.
Right.
So I just grind quests instead, because I didn't have any other choice at that point.
Right. And so so that's but so a lot of games, like you have this content, and you see this a little bit like in World of Warcraft. Like one of the main complaints about World of Warcraft is like if you start playing the game, if you start leveling up, like they try to shove you through the game as fast as possible
to get you to the current stuff.
Right. And and essentially it makes it so that like you can't even enjoy this, what little story they had provided through the the quest lines in a zone in World of Warcraft. You're going to outlevel the quest before you even get through them, because they wanted to shove you through that stuff so fast.
Mm-hmm. And now it's like you don't even do it in the order it was intended to anymore, because of the zone syncing. So like you all zones in Kalimdor basically go from after the starter zone, they all sync from 1 to 60. Or from 10 to 60. So you literally just go to whatever zone you want to, do all the quests there, go to whatever next zone you want to go to.
Ah, interesting.
So like there's no linear order of where to go.
So you could be one person could be in the level 20 version of Night Vale, and somebody else could be at the level 40 version, huh?
Yeah. It all just syncs to your character.
And I assume like people are not sharing these instances except for people around their level. So unless you happen to be at the same level as someone else that was doing that it goes back to that whole lonely experience thing.
Mm-hmm.
Huh, interesting.
And then you can end up doing like Wrath of the Lich King, which is supposed to be like level 70 to 80, and you can be doing that at level 60. Which is like, when I saw the levels when I was playing, I'm just like, this isn't right. Like this isn't my World of Warcraft.
Right. But so this is kind of the idea of like trying to give new life to what to content that's been obsoleted.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in a lot of other games, like in Meridian, like there were some areas that were basically a little harder, a little like we didn't have kind of high-end level scaling. You know, there's some areas that were a little bit better for farming. There's other places. A lot of times, you know, what kind of made a place better for farming was essentially like how much do people leave you alone?
Right.
Usually, you can get uninterrupted farming, and you're not competing with other people. Yeah, and so you know, like the power level is very flat. Like you know, but you get as you get kind of like the exponential power curve in a lot of MMOs, you know, like, you know, there's no reason to kind of wander back to the low level zones anymore.
Unless there's an artificial purpose.
Right. And you know, like Guild Wars 2 kind of did the whole, like, you know, scaling zone thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That annoyed me. When I play Guild Wars 2, because, like, the leveling process in Guild Wars 2 really bothered me, because everything, the time to level was a flat rate. It never curved.
Right.
So
and if you went back to earlier zones, it would basically sink your level down.
Mm-hmm. So that, you know, there was no gain of power.
Right.
So like that bothered me when I was doing it.
Right. No, I can definitely see that.
Like personally, I like the Final Fantasy 11 process of doing that, where you can sync, because as I was saying, they could play with their friends that are leveling. 11 has it that you can sync to your party members.
Right.
And I like that because it's optional.
Right. Yeah, like that was kind of a little bit of fashion for games where City of Heroes had the sidekicking system, where, you know, you could basically, you know, if a friend started playing, you could bump them up. Like, they wouldn't have all their skills and whatnot, so they'd be a little bit a weaker character. But, you know, like, you could basically, they would be essentially your sidekick, and you could go do high level missions with them. And then EverQuest 2 had mentoring, which is kind of the opposite, where a high level person can basically lower their level temporarily to go do low level content with a friend and help work them up. The bonus was basically that, you know, as you're doing low level content, you got rewarded, you know, kind of the same with the roulettes in Final Fantasy. You got rewarded as if you're doing it at your higher level. So if you're level 40 in EverQuest 2 and you were going to help your friend doing level 20 stuff, you were getting experience that basically was the equivalent of if you're level 40. The kind of the funny thing, of course, is that, you know, people exploited this, where you know, if you had a low level friend, you'd basically sync with them for a bit and go turn in quests. And especially if you could find someone that was like, you know, super low level, you could basically go and turn in very difficult quests. You know, turn them in when they were essentially red difficulty marked, and get a bonus because you're turning in a very hard quest, essentially.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It was you know, like, it was basically a little way to kind of exploit the thing. You know, something that's kind of hard to work around. But yeah, like, you know, like, but so you have kind of, and like we see this a little bit in we see this also in Final Fantasy 14, where like, now that you have an expansion that went beyond that area, like, there's very little reason to go to Ishgard unless you're working through Heavenward content. And so, like, you know, going through the Ishgard area feels very empty compared to when you were doing it during Heaven. Relatively, because, you know, like, you know, when people got to high level, like, everybody's hanging out Idleshire instead of Ishgard, of course. Yeah, but even then, like, you know, Ishgard, you know, Idleshire feels empty now compared to when it was kind of the high level hub in Heavensward.
Yeah, that's the weird thing that 14 does, because I always enjoyed kind of hanging, like in Warcraft, for example, or any other MMO. It's fun kind of hanging out in cities and just kind of hang out in like the new expansion city or whatever. But 14 just decided, yeah, we'll make the city, but all the vendors that everyone's gonna want is gonna be in this other place.
Right. And higher level area, yeah.
Which I thought was kind of weird, but I guess it's so that the cities don't get congested.
Right, exactly. I think that was kind of like definitely one of the motivating factors that But again, like it feels a little bit like the cities kind of feel a little abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so
And like most people in like the role playing servers, they don't even hang out in the cities. They just hide in their residential zones.
right, yeah. I mean, housing is another one of those interesting things where it becomes one of those things where if housing is kind of separated out from things. EverQuest 2 was very interesting because like a lot of the housing essentially was personal, the equivalent of personal rooms, the equivalent of like the apartments in Final Fantasy 14, but the
Mm-hmm.
entrances were in cities. So basically, you had if you're going to go hang out in your place, you ran through the city. You would see other people, potentially see other people nearby, but um, the kind of the last kind of